The wind did not knock. It hit the stone hut like a charging animal. Snow struck the low roof and slid down in thick sheets. Ice scraped across the buried north wall. The air outside screamed across Judith Basin as if trying to peel the land open. Inside, Miriam Caldwell placed one more log onto the fire. She did not rush. She did not look at the door. She simply watched the flames catch, then settle. If you have ever waded through a winter night, you know that sound. The way wind presses against wood and makes a house answer back. Tonight, 3 miles north of the settlement, one house did not answer at all. The storm grew stronger. The heavy pine cabins down near the store shuddered. Chimneys groaned under snow. Doors rattled in their frames. Men fed their stoves with both hands, breaking kindling faster than they could stack it. Miriam's hut made no sound. The walls were thick stone, packed tight with clay and sand. The north side leaned into the hillside itself. Earth held one wall like a firm hand against the cold. The fire burned steady against the west wall, inside a firebox built of dense river rock. No tall chimney pulled heat upward. The ceiling stayed low, just high enough for a grown man to stand. Heat had nowhere to run. Up in the loft, her 2 children lay asleep under plain wool blankets. No extra coats, no boots at the edge of the bed. Their breath did not hang white in the air. Miriam stepped toward the door. She pressed her palm flat against the stone beside it. Warm, not hot, not blazing, just steady. The storm had been building since morning. By afternoon, the creek had vanished under ice. By evening, the sky disappeared in white. She remembered another winter. Pine logs stacked high, mud chinking, cracking in the wind, waking every few hours to feed a hungry stove while cold crept along the floorboards. She remembered her youngest coughing into a blanket. She had not built this hut to impress anyone. She built it because she was tired of losing sleep to cold. Back in May, when snow melted off the ridge, she began hauling stone, sandstone from the hill, smooth river rock from the creek bed, chunks of limestone dug from old ground. Neighbors rode past and slowed their horses. One of them, Jacob Hartley, had leaned forward in his saddle and studied the low walls rising from the earth. "Looks like a root cellar," he had said. Miriam wiped dust from her hands and kept working. By July, the walls were 2 feet thick at the base. She checked each line with a weighted string her father once used in Colorado. Clay mortar packed tight between stone. No gaps. The north wall sank 3 feet into soil. The other walls she banked with earth and sod. She was not fighting winter. She was letting the land hold it back. Now winter had come to test her. The wind slammed again. Inside, the fire cracked once and settled into coals. Miriam added no more wood. She moved to the small south window and lifted the edge of the oiled canvas. Snow flew sideways across the dark yard. Fences were already half buried. She let the canvas fall back into place. The air inside the hut felt the same as it had at midday. She sat at the rough table and placed her hands flat against the surface. The stone walls behind her held the day's warmth. Hours after flame touched them, they gave it back slowly. Outside, other families were burning through their stacked cords. Wood disappeared fast when air stole heat as quickly as it formed. Stone did not rush. Stone waited. Near midnight, the storm reached its full strength. Snow packed hard against cabins across the basin. Chimneys struggled. Fires roared and shrank and roared again. In the stone hut, the coals glowed low and red. Miriam lay down on her narrow bed without adding another log. The room did not cool. The wind did not find a crack. And somewhere beyond the white darkness, timber walls were beginning to fail. But the low stone hut did not move. By dawn, the wind had sharpened. It cut across Judith Basin and drove snow into every seam of every timber wall. Jacob Hartley had not slept. He stood in his cabin with his back against the door, shoulders pressed hard as the wind shoved from outside. Frost had crept across the inside boards during the night. Ice traced the lines where logs met. His fire roared. It had to. Every time the flames settled, the room changed. The floor stiffened. The far corners turned white. His breath hung in front of him and drifted toward the rafters. He fed the stove again. Wood stacked high in October was already half gone. 3 miles north, Miriam Caldwell rose before the sun. The stone floor held a gentle warmth beneath her boots. The coals in the firebox still glowed from the log she placed before bed. She knelt and stirred them with an iron poker. A small flame answered. She added 1 split log and closed the iron door. The sound inside the hut was soft. No rattling, no boards snapping, only wind passing over sod and sliding down stone. Her children climbed down from the loft ladder. OIR. They did not rush to the fire. They moved as they always did, rubbing their eyes, sitting at the small table. No frost marked the inside of the walls. Miriam pressed her hand against the stone again. Still warm. Outside, snow drove sideways. Visibility dropped to nothing. Fences vanished. The ridge behind her hut disappeared in white. At the settlement, families had begun leaving their homes. Men broke apart spare furniture for fuel. Women stuffed cloth into cracks where air screamed through. Some gathered at the general store where bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder. The storm did not ease. It deepened. By the second night, Jacob Hartley's stacked wood was nearly gone. He split a chair leg with his axe and shoved it into the stove. The flames leapt high and died fast. The heat climbed toward the ceiling and slipped away through places he had never noticed before. His youngest boy slept wrapped in a coat near the hearth. The rest of the room lay cold and distant. 3 miles north, Miriam fed her fire once in the evening. 2 logs. She watched the flames catch, then stepped back. The riverstone of the firebox darkened and absorbed the heat. The thick walls drank it in without hurry. Hours later, after the flames fell to coals, warmth still filled the hut evenly from floor to ceiling. She climbed into bed and listened. The wind scraped against sod and moved on. On the third morning, the temperature dropped further, 40 below. Outside, even standing still became dangerous. Raymond Voss walked the inside of his cabin and inspected corners with stiff fingers. Frost gathered thick where the walls met the floor. He moved his children closer to the hearth. The fire demanded constant feeding. He gave it everything. In Miriam's hut, the air remained steady. She opened the door briefly to shake snow from the threshold. Cold air rushed in, sharp and biting. She closed the door. Within minutes, the chill softened. The walls returned what they had stored. Her woodpile under the small lean-to remained mostly untouched. She counted quietly. 4 logs yesterday, 1 this morning. The storm did not break on the 4th day. It tightened. Snow climbed higher against cabins across the basin. Chimneys smoked poorly under weight. Some roofs sagged. Inside her stone hut, Miriam sat beside the firebox with her sewing in her lap. The coals glowed low. The room did not cool. Heat moved through stone slowly, without waste, without rush. Outside, men measured survival in shrinking piles of wood. Inside, Miriam waited, and somewhere beyond the white storm, someone would soon notice the difference. On the 4th morning, the wind stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Snow lay deep across Judith Basin. Fences were buried. Smoke rose thin from chimneys that had survived. Jacob Hartley stepped outside his cabin with slow movements. His woodpile was gone. Broken chair legs lay near the stove. His breath hung thick in the still air. He looked north. A thin line of smoke lifted from the low stone hut. He narrowed his eyes. 3 miles north, Miriam Caldwell opened her door. Snow had piled halfway up the frame. She pushed it aside with a shovel and stepped into clear blue light. The air bit at her face, but inside the hut, the warmth held steady. She turned back and glanced at the firebox. Coals, no roaring blaze, no desperate feeding, just steady red. Her children moved about the room as they always did. One sat near the table with a slate. The other stacked kindling in neat lines. There was no frost along the walls, no damp streaks, no smoke clinging to the ceiling. A trapper named Colin Mathers came walking from the north ridge by midday. His beard was stiff with ice. His coat carried snow crusted along the seams. He stopped at the sight of the hut. It did not sag. It did not lean. It sat low and firm against the hillside as if the storm had passed over it without interest. He stepped closer and knocked once. Miriam opened the door. Warm air rolled out. Mathers paused at the threshold, his shoulders lowered without him noticing. He stepped inside and removed his gloves slowly. He held his palm to the wall beside the door. Warm. Not hot. Even. He glanced at the firebox. "That all?" He asked quietly. Miriam nodded. He walked to the lean-to outside where the wood was stacked. Most of it remained untouched. He counted the missing pieces with his eyes. 10 logs, perhaps, for 4 days. He did not speak again for a long moment. By evening, he reached the settlement and told what he had seen. At first, men shook their heads. "Stone gets cold," someone muttered. Still, by the next morning, riders began heading north, not in a crowd, one at a time. Jacob Hartley arrived first. He removed his hat before stepping inside. His boots tracked snow across the floor, and he wiped them carefully without being asked. He walked the room in silence. He stood near the door. near the far wall, near the floor. The temperature did not change. Raymond Voss came later with his hands clasped behind his back. He inspected mortar lines. He crouched near the base where stone met earth. He examined the ceiling where sod rested thick above the logs. There was no moisture beading along the walls, no rot, no smell of trapped damp. He straightened slowly. "I misjudged it," he said. Miriam gave a small nod and returned to her work. By the end of November, talk at the general store had shifted. No one laughed at the low roof now. By December, Samuel Pritchard arrived with a thermometer from St. Louis. He placed it on the table in the morning, then again at midday, then near evening. Outside, the temperature hovered well below freezing. Inside, it barely moved, 68, 70, 66. Hour after hour. He kept notes in a small leather book. Over 7 days, Miriam burned fewer than 20 logs. His own timber cabin, nearly the same size, had burned more than 40. Numbers did not argue. They settled the matter. By January, new stone walls began rising across Judith Basin. Some families built full huts. Others lined the inside of their log cabins with thick stone heat walls. Roofs were lowered. Windows shrank. Earth was banked high against north sides. Jacob Hartley built a stone bunkhouse for his ranch hands. They slept through the night without rising to feed a stove. Winter rolled on. The stone hut stood unchanged. Miriam never claimed invention. Omission. She never gathered neighbors to explain. Each morning she added a log. Each evening she did the same. The walls took the heat quietly and gave it back without hurry. Years later, travelers would still find the hut resting against the hillside north of what became Lewistown. The roof would be replaced. The walls would not shift. Step inside on a cold afternoon and press your palm against the stone. It will still answer back, steady, unmoved, as if winter had never touched it.